Hey, I'm Blair Best. It's Friday here on The Story, and tonight, the federal government sued the state of Oregon this week over not providing certain voter data. We got our hands on letters between Oregon's Secretary of State and the DOJ. Plus, we'll share some of your thoughts, praise, and criticism on the trip to Vienna, Austria by 3 Portland City councilors. But first, more delays for the I-5 bridge replacement project over the Columbia. Now, state lawmakers on both sides of the river are growing impatient, and it's our big story tonight. So we were first tipped off to these most recent project delays last week when Vancouver's mayor sort of let off some steam about it at the end of a Clark County transportation meeting. This week, those concerns were backed up by state lawmakers. Here's Oregon Senator Confam. You won't see her, but you will hear her. Let's listen.
And now it looks like the earliest we could have a record of decision would be April of 2026, which is 2.5 years later than what we were told in 2020, the Oregon legislature. And I'm just concerned because this is driving up costs for Oregon and Washington taxpayers, and when we miss our deadlines, it really does have an impact on our transportation budget as we try to find the funding to make up for the increased costs.
Now, two worlds collide this week as Oregon's transportation funding woes, still unresolved by the way, come up in discussions about the new I-5 bridge project. The project is aiming to break ground next year, but there are 3 key things that need to happen first, and that's where delays seem to be piling up. Number 1, the project needs to finish the federal environmental review process, which ends with a record of decision, basically the federal green light to start construction. It was supposed to be done around this time of year, but now appears to be bumped to April. Number 2, the Coast Guard needs to give a final answer about whether it will allow the new bridges to sit closer to the water than the maximum height of the current drawbridge. Number 3, the project team needs to publish an updated cost estimate. Now let's pause on those last 2 for a moment. When it comes to the Coast Guard's concerns, the Interstate Bridge Replacement Team, or IBR, wants to build the new bridge without a drawbridge section, but that means it'll have about 60 feet less clearance than the current bridge. So they have to convince the Coast Guard that everyone upriver can live with that. If they can't, then the new bridge will have to be a drawbridge too. That negotiation has been going on for years and doesn't really have a clear end date, but it does have a deadline. The record of decision will only approve 1 design, so the drawbridge question must be resolved before that. And then we can't forget about the cost. The latest estimate for the project came out 2 years ago in January, ranging from $5 to $7.5 billion. But with inflation, the cost is expected to be higher. IBR said last year that they were working on an updated cost estimate, but were waiting until the environmental review and design work got farther along so they could be more precise. But all of these moving parts and delays from the original timeline have lawmakers in both Oregon and Washington running out of patience.
We've been waiting a long time for an updated cost estimate, and we do have a meeting, if I'm correct, on December 15th, which is pretty late in 2025, and I believe about a year since we were promised one. I would really request that we actually have an updated cost estimate for that December 15th meeting, please. Thank you.
Now, we followed up with IBR to see if they could hit that deadline, and they said they're planning to, so we'll have to wait and see. Right now, the project is in relatively good financial shape if the cost comes in around $6 billion. All told, it's got about $4.3 billion lined up from federal grants and state funding. And both states have authorized tolling, which is expected to bring in anywhere from $1.2 to $1.6 billion. The last piece is another $1 billion federal grant for light rail, which is still in the application process. But all together, and the project would have between $6 and $7 billion if tolling revenue comes in high enough and that light rail grant comes through, neither of which are guaranteed. And even if all that works out, again, the upper end of the cost estimate from 2023 is $7.5 billion. If the new cost estimate winds up higher than that, which is a possibility, then there's a problem. And that's not to mention other potential financial pitfalls next year. One of them is the Coast Guard drawbridge question. It's called a movable span. which came up in the meeting with state lawmakers this week.
If the movable span becomes the option, is it still possible to begin construction in 2026? And do you have a rough idea on what that would add to the cost of the project? Thank you.
At this point, we know some of the other spans that will be fixed could begin construction on our original schedule. And while the movable span itself, which is 400 feet of 3,000 feet of bridge, that span can be designed, can be procured going out into the future. But we know that it will be more costly. We have shared this with the Coast Guard based on our last estimate. We had pegged that cost at over $400 million additional to build a movable span. But we still think that we can hold our schedule to get in water to start construction on the Columbia River Bridge itself as we have projected.
So another $400 million minimum and more design time for the drawbridge, although other parts of the project could still start construction next year. And we learned about another financial risk this week if the start of construction is pushed past 2026.
We have grants that have to be obligated and agreed to in 2026, or we have the potential of having those grants expire. So we have some hard deadlines that we are putting on the table for folks to keep our schedule of getting to a record of decision in 2026.
IBR said the specific deadline is September 30th of next year. They have to start spending a large chunk of one of the federal grants on construction by then. So you can see why the record of decision getting pushed back to April is making people nervous. And no one's quite saying it, but we can imagine it's a bit frustrating for the federal review to be dragging on long enough to push up against the federal construction deadline, assuming the April date holds for that record of decision. That's a window of just 5 months to put contracts out and get shovels in the ground. IBR told us they can do it. They've already got the project broken up into construction packages. The bridge itself is supposed to be one of the first to get underway, but there's plenty of other work that can get started in 2026, even if they end up having to take more time to design a drawbridge. But still, that's a lot that has to go right, a lot that could go wrong, and an increasingly narrow window for all of it to happen. We'll be watching. Well, earlier this week, we told you the U.S. Justice Department is suing the state of Oregon for rejecting demands to turn over detailed voter information. The complaint alleges Oregon broke federal laws by failing to provide a statewide voter registration list. Okay, that includes birthdays, driver's license numbers, and social security numbers. Evan Watson got his hands on letters between Oregon's Secretary of State and the feds, and he joins us now with a closer look at how this all played out.
This is part of an effort by the Trump administration to try and prove widespread voter fraud. Claims that undocumented people and felons have been illegally voting in U.S. elections on a broad scale. So far, those claims have been unsubstantiated. In a July 16th letter to the Oregon Secretary of State's office, the DOJ highlighted its focus on non-citizens and people with felony convictions. A week later, Oregon Secretary of State Tobias Read responded to the request for voter data, saying, "At best, I do not trust that this current administration is capable of protecting Oregonians' personal data. At worst, I am concerned that this administration will use any data we provide to unlawfully and unjustly violate Oregonians' rights. I have no interest in sharing data with an administration that is willfully violating judicial orders and trampling on constitutional rights and responsibilities." That strong response produced a follow-up from the Justice Department in August, again asking for a voter registration list with detailed information. Read said the Founding Fathers tasked the states, not the federal government, with administrating free and fair elections, and no federal law compels the production of state voter rolls. He then told the DOJ in his reply that the feds could have access to certain voter registration data that's available to the public, including a voter's address and birth year, for a $500 fee, saying if the federal government pays for public records just like anyone else, he'll pass over basic voter information but Oregon law prohibits the disclosure of a voter's birthday, social security, and driver's license number. The DOJ says Oregon and other states already provide the detailed voter information to a nonprofit organization, the Electronic Registration Information Center, or ERIC. ERIC helps track whether voters have moved and identify duplicate registrations to clean voter rolls. The DOJ says it should have this information too, but there is a key difference here. ERIC uses what it calls a cryptographic one-way hash to ensure that data can't be read by humans in order to protect voter privacy, but still identify duplicates. The DOJ has not offered the same privacy protections. That brings us to the present. Nearly a month after Reed's August 21st letter denying the DOJ a detailed list of Oregon voters, the federal government filed a lawsuit against the state of Oregon this week. An assistant attorney general said the refusal of certain states to protect their citizens against vote dilution will result in legal consequences. Reed answered, "If the president wants to use the DOJ to go after his political opponents and undermine our elections, I look forward to seeing them in court. I stand by my oath to the people of Oregon." We'll keep following this to see how this lawsuit and case progresses. Blair?
Evan, thank you. Well, if the city of Portland was hoping to stay out of the spotlight when it comes to some kind of federal intervention like the National Guard being sent here, it is safe to say that ship has sailed. We know President Trump previously mentioned the Rose City by name, the living in hell quote, but the city came up again today in the Oval Office when he was asked about Antifa. Listen.
Have you seen Portland at all? Have you taken a look at what's happening in Portland? It's, I mean, this has been going on for years. It's just people out of control. They're crazy. We're going to stop that very soon. We have to get rid of a couple of other problems first. We're going to get rid of the problems in Memphis where you can't even walk a block without getting shot. We're going to get rid of the problems in Chicago. Chicago's a great city and we have to save it.
Now, last time the president mentioned Portland, Mayor Keith Wilson told us, like other mayors across the country, I have not asked for and do not need federal intervention. We've asked the mayor for another statement in light of the president's comments today and have not heard back yet. Well, turning now to an update on cleanup efforts at the Hanford site in the state of Washington. Earlier this week, we told you how Senators Marie Cantwell and Patty Murray were furious with the Department of Energy, who appeared to be stalling or considering an alternative to the $20+ billion decades-long project that was set to take its next step a month from now, turning some of the liquid radioactive waste at the site into a more stable form of glass. This is what that looks like. All of the radioactive waste at the site is due to the production of plutonium from the 1940s, which was then used in nuclear weapons during World War II. Well, there's good news for those who live near Hanford and those of you across the Columbia River in Oregon. The Department of Energy has signed the paperwork to allow the next step of the cleanup to move forward, finally clearing up some of the mixed signals that have been floating around for weeks. Senator Cantwell wrote, "I look forward to October 15th, when tank waste will be removed, treated, and safely stored for disposal for the first time in the decades-long effort to clean up Hanford." And Senator Murray also released a statement saying, in part, "Cleaning up Hanford is not something we can afford to cut corners on or get wrong, and I'll continue to stand up to any attempt by the Trump administration to interfere with the Hanford cleanup." All right, now let's get to some of your thoughts on our interview last night with Portland City Councilor Jamie Dunphy. He joined me live in studio to talk about his trip to Vienna, Austria. He went with two other city councilors, Mitch Green and Candace Avalos, plus staff, to learn about social housing. The councilors used their office budgets, meaning taxpayer dollars, to pay for it. The total cost was around $46,000, and many of you had plenty to say about it. We'll start with those of you who think the trip was a good thing based off of what Councilor Dunphy had to say last night.
I really loved that he indicated that the cost of this trip was, what did he say, 0.1% of his office budget. I've learned through many years, over 20 years at Intel, that actually going to visit the place that you need to learn from is absolutely essential. The Zoom sessions just you don't get the real value that you need from information seeking.
Kathleen wrote to us saying, I am glad that the group traveled to Vienna to see how another city is having success dealing with a thorny issue. It sounds as if it was very informative and they come home energized and thinking about Portland differently. I don't want our leaders making policy in a vacuum. If we are to be a world-class city, we need to be out in the world.
It was really interesting, and I think that he clearly demonstrated the value of that trip for him.
And Candy chimed in, the cost is absolutely worth it if it will change the way Portland looks at affordable housing, and the points that Dunphy brought up are just the beginning. But we need to start now. What we don't need are years of committee meetings and study after study. Okay, but as you might expect, Councillor Dunphy's points last night did not sway all of you. Brian wrote in saying, the trip to Vienna is a joke and a slap in the face to Oregon taxpayers. Your team traveled all the way to Europe to come back and report that Vienna's success is due to affordable housing. And what reality do you think, with Portland's major taxes on residents, do you think you will ever create and incentivize affordable housing here? Fix the city's current tax structure first.
Who is this guy? Mary Poppins? They're on the full trains. They're off to the library. Sure, buddy. If you want to see all that, man, you're milking us for a bunch of money every year. Go to Vienna on your own dime like the rest of us. What a joke.
And we'll end on this from Rich, who quoted something Councillor Dunphy told me last night. The city of Portland has literally hundreds of affordable housing units sitting empty, says the city councillor. But they had to go to Vienna to find out what is wrong. Instead of spending that money on airfare, they should spend a little more time out on the streets of Portland. Well, coming up next on the story, the Chinook Nation was once recognized by the federal government in the early 2000s, but that ruling was reversed not long after. Now, the tribe is working with federal lawmakers to restore that status. What it would mean for tribal members if it ends up happening. That's when the story returns. In Salem, we're still a couple weeks away from finding out if a major transportation bill will be approved. But that bill is one of the main reasons why one state lawmaker will not seek a second term. Anessa Hartman was the lone Democrat to vote against the transportation package in the House during the special session. She represents Gladstone in Oregon City. Well, she sat down with Stephanie Domerat for Straight Talk to talk about what led to her decision to drop out of state politics.
I think people are constantly thinking about how is this vote going to impact my election next year, or how am I going to have to discuss this with my party rather than with the people.
Hartman also said she believes partisan politics has kept constituents out of the conversation and has led to an erosion of trust in elected officials to find solutions. You can watch the full conversation on Straight Talk this weekend here on KGW or Monday night at 7 o'clock right after the story, or watch anytime on our free TV app, KGW+. Well, for decades, Chinook Nation near Astoria has pushed for federal recognition, which they say can lead to federal grants and more opportunities for tribal members. Now, they're asking federal lawmakers for help. Thomas Schultz walks us through what's happening.
Leaders of Chinook Nation tell me that for years, the nation has been left out of opportunities granted to federally recognized tribes, and this can be a really big deal. Federal grants can help tribes expand energy capabilities, boost economic development, and even preserve native languages. There are also housing programs to help tribal members who are homeless or have substandard living conditions, but that help is only available to members of federally recognized tribes. Chinook is not federally recognized, though at one point it was, back in 2001, dating back to the Clinton administration, which granted Chinook federal recognition. Though a year later, once George Bush became president, the ruling was reversed, with the federal government concluding Chinook did not meet all the criteria to be recognized as a tribe.
One of the hardest things about being in the elected role that I am in currently is the telephone calls that you get from members who have a need that you could resolve or assist in a really different way if Chinook had its federal acknowledgement clarified.
The leader of Chinook Nation, Tony Johnson, says he's pushing delegates in Washington and Oregon to come up with legislation providing Chinook federal recognition. We reached out to delegates all across Oregon. Senator Ron Wyden's office got back to us and said that the senator is crafting legislation and working on it that would have support in Washington. In the newsroom, Thomas Schultz, KGW News.
Well, coming up next on the story, did you know that actor Tom Hanks loves typewriters? And when visiting Portland 2 years ago, he purchased one at a local shop and made a promise to that shop owner. But last week, that promise was fulfilled. We'll explain when the story returns. So 2 years ago, actor Tom Hanks told the owner of a Portland typewriter shop that he'd send him a signed machine from his own collection. But after several months with nothing, he figured it wasn't coming. That is until last week when a package arrived. Devin Haskins has the story.
In this quiet shop in Southeast Portland, the room filled with these metal machines of yesteryear.
For me, it's the connection to the word.
Anthony Volpe opened Typespace 4 years ago and saw success right away.
2 weeks after I opened, Willamette Week put us in their top 100 annual best businesses of Portland issue.
On the shelf are about 25 or so typewriters to buy, with another 150 being refurbished or fixed. Every piece here has written a story.
It makes my writing more intentional because I don't have cut and paste, delete. I really have to think about what I'm putting down.
Volpe's shop attracts all sorts of customers, from collectors, first-timers, young, old, and even those from Hollywood. In 2023, actor Tom Hanks was in Portland for a book tour.
Just the nicest guy.
And stopped by.
So we just talked about typewriters, not much about his movies or things like that.
Hanks, a typewriter aficionado, stayed about an hour, bought one of the typewriters for his own use, and left.
On the way out, he said, hey, I'm going to send you an autographed typewriter out of my collection.
That was 2023.
I had kind of forgot about it altogether.
2 years later, after sending Tom's manager a message on another matter, he says they realized they forgot as well.
Said, we're going to get it out immediately.
A couple days later, a package.
I just got it in, yep.
A 1955 Rheinmetall typewriter from Germany, one from Hanks's personal collection, signed by him, as promised.
So it's going to stay at the front table here.
It's a piece of memorabilia and a piece of analog history.
People can come down and type on it. That's great. It's not hands off.
Proudly displayed, sitting front and center at Typespace. In Southeast Portland, Devin Haskins, KGW News.
Well, that is the end of our show, folks. Thanks so much for watching. Timbers 360 is coming your way next. And don't forget, everyone has a story to tell. Have a great weekend. I'll see you right back here on Monday night at 6:30.